cold seeped through my morning leathers, a serpent of ice winding its way into my bones. Before me, the flames of the great pyre licked at the heavens, consuming the last earthly vessel of my mate, my Alpha, my Jorvin. The acrid scent of burning pine and sacred herbs mingled with the metallic tang of 1,000 heartbreaks, a perfume of grief that choked the frigid night air. Shadows danced like hungry spirits at the edge of the clearing, cast by the roaring fire that was meant to light his path to the moon's embrace. They saw a Luna broken, a widow shrouded in sorrow, her spirit meant to burn to ash alongside her husband's body. But inside, my wolf paced. She tasted the weakness in the air, the cloying scent of pity from the pack, the sharp, ambitious hunger of those who would see his throne filled. They expected me to crumble, to weep until I was empty, to become a ghost in the halls where I once walked as a queen. The whispers were a constant rustle of leaves in the wind, words of succession, of tradition, of the way things must be. They did not know the beast that slumbered behind my eyes, the one Jorvin had seen, the one he had loved. The embers of his pyre were not the only fire that would burn tonight. Elder Maeve, her face a roadmap of wrinkled tradition, stepped forward. Her voice, though thinned by age, carried across the silent clearing. We mourn the passing of Alpha Jorvin Kael'thor, a titan, a father, a mate. Her gaze, heavy with sympathy that felt like a shroud, fell upon me. And we mourn with his Luna Hyellus, whose bond is now broken, whose heart is now halved. A murmur of agreement, a chorus of low, respectful growls, rippled through the assembled pack. They stood in a great semicircle, their forms shifting between human and something more primal in the flickering firelight. Warriors, tenders, omegas. All eyes were on me, waiting for the performance of my grief, the final act of my life as a woman of consequence. Tradition guides us in these dark times, Maeve continued, her voice gaining strength, becoming a gavel of law. It is the bedrock of our pack. As Jorvin's spirit ascends, so too must we look to the living, to the bloodline that keeps us strong. She turned her head, her gaze seeking out a figure standing tall and silent at the edge of the elders' circle. Kaelin, son of Jorvin's first blood, stepped forward. The pack parted like a river around a stone. Kaelin moved with a lethal grace that always made my wolf's hackles rise. He was Gorvin's cousin, but where Jorvin was the sun, warmth and fury and brilliant light, Kaelin was the unforgiving winter. Tall, broad-shouldered, with hair the color of midnight and eyes like chips of flint, he was power personified. A jagged scar ran from his temple down his jaw, a permanent sneer carved into his flesh by a rival pack's alpha years ago. He had won that fight. He always won. He stopped beside the pyre, the heat doing nothing to melt the frost that seemed to cling to him. His scent cut through the smoke and sorrow, clean, cold, the smell of winter frost, and iron. He gave me a curt, formal nod. There was no warmth in it, only the barest acknowledgement of my station, a station he was about to render obsolete. The bloodline is clear, Maeve declared. The strength is proven. Kaelin is the rightful heir to the Alpha's seat. By the laws of our ancestors, he will lead the Kael'thor pack. A hollow ache opened in my chest, a void far colder and deeper than the grief for my husband. This was it, the erasure. Jorvin had been dead for 3 days, and they were already sweeping me aside like dust. I was to become a relic, the Alpha's widow, a title that meant nothing more than a pensioner, a creature of pity to be housed and fed until I wasted away. My hands, hidden in the folds of my leather tunic, trembled, not with fear, with rage. A low growl vibrated in my chest, so deep only I could feel it. They would chain you, my wolf snarled, her voice a storm in my mind. They would put you in a cage of memories and watch you fade. Jorvin's mate, fading. I remembered Jorvin's hands on my face, his thumb tracing my jaw. You are no fragile thing, Hyellus, he had whispered to me one night, under this very moon. Your wolf has the heart of a conqueror. She frightens the elders. Good. Let them be frightened of my queen. He had seen her. He had seen me. Do you accept this charge, Kaelin? Elder Maeve asked, her voice ringing with finality. Kaelin's flint-gray eyes met mine across the roaring flames. There was a flicker of something in their depths, not pity, but a cold assessment. He was measuring me, my reaction, my compliance. He expected me to bow my head, to accept my fate. I do, Kaelin's voice was a low rumble, the sound of rocks grinding together. It was a voice made for command. I will honor my cousin's legacy. I will protect this pack. He paused, his gaze still locked on me. And I will see that his Luna is given the respect and care she is due for the remainder of her days. The remainder of my days. The words were a death sentence. The moon, full and impossibly bright, crested the ancient pines surrounding the clearing. Its silver light poured down, drenching us, painting the world in shades of pearl and shadow. A primal energy surged through me, a direct line from the celestial body to the marrow of my bones. My wolf rose up, no longer pacing but clawing at the bars of my human restraint. No, the word was a silent scream in my soul. I am not a memory. I am not a relic. I am the mate of the Alpha. His power was my power, his pack my pack. As Maeve raised her hands to complete the ritual, to anoint Kaelin with the ceremonial ash from the pyre, my body moved of its own accord. I took a step forward, the crunch of my boot on the frozen earth a gunshot in the charged silence. Every head turned. Kaelin's eyes narrowed. Maeve's hand froze in midair. Luna, she questioned, her tone laced with a sharp edge of warning. This is not your place. His place was by my side, I said, my voice rough, torn from a throat raw with unshed screams. And my place was by his. We were two halves of a whole. You cannot honor one half by discarding the other. A wave of shock rippled through the pack. A Luna did not speak during a succession rite. A widow did not question the elders. I was breaking a dozen sacred protocols with every breath I took. Kaelin took a half step toward me. A silent threat. A low growl escaped his lips. A clear command. Yield. My wolf answered him. She rose from the depths of my grief. A tidal wave of pure, untamed power. My head snapped back, my spine arching. The moonlight felt like a physical weight, a crown settling on my brow. The howl that tore from my throat was not mine. It belonged to the beast within, a creature forged in love and loss and fury. It was not a sound of grief. It was not a lament for a dead mate. It was a sound of command. A blast of sound and power that silenced the crackling fire and shook the very ground. It was the howl of an alpha, a declaration of dominance, a challenge, a claim. The flames of the pyre roared toward the sky as if in answer. The pack stumbled back. A collective gasp ripped through the assembly, their eyes wide with disbelief and a dawning primal fear. They had never heard such a sound from a Luna. It was impossible. It was sacrilege. The howl ripped through the forest, echoing off the mountains, a promise and a threat carried on the wind. When it finally ended, the silence it left behind was absolute, profound, and terrifying. I lowered my head, my breath coming in ragged pants. My eyes, when I opened them, felt like they were glowing with an inner light. I stared directly at Kaelin, whose handsome face was a mask of cold, controlled fury. His own eyes were blazing now, the silver of his wolf eclipsing the gray of his human gaze. The law of succession is absolute, he snarled, his voice a deadly whisper. You are the Luna, you have no claim. I took another step, planting my feet on the sacred ground before the pyre, claiming the space as my own. The heat was a caress on my skin. I could feel Jorvin's spirit in the rising smoke, not departing, but settling around me like a cloak. The law was written by men who feared the power of the she-wolf, I declared, my voice now clear and strong, imbued with the authority of the howl that had just shaken their world. It was written by alphas who saw their Lunas as possessions. Jorvin Kael'thor never saw me as a possession. He saw me as his equal. I swept my gaze over the sea of stunned faces. The elders, the warriors, the pack. I held the eyes of each one I could, forcing them to see me, not as the grieving widow, but as the power that now stood before them. His strength is in my blood. His heart beats with mine. His wolf runs with my own. You would follow a cousin's claim, a claim of distant blood, over the claim of the soul bond? I let the question hang in the air, a seed of doubt planted in the bedrock of their tradition. Then I looked back at the pretender, the usurper who stood cloaked in ice and arrogance. My name is Hyalus Dravane, I said, my voice ringing with an ancient power I hadn't known I possessed. And by the light of the moon and the ashes of my mate, I claim the Alpha's seat. The silence that followed was louder than any war cry. The air, already thin with cold, became unbreathable. My challenge hung between us, a blade suspended over the neck of 1,000 years of tradition. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but the hiss and crackle of Jorvin's pyre and the silent silver judgment of the moon. The pack was a forest of statues, their shock so profound it felt like a physical force, pressing in on me from all sides. Their scents turned sour with confusion and fear. Then the spell broke. Blasphemy! The shriek came from Elder Maeve. Her face, which had been a mask of solemn grief, twisted into a snarl of pure outrage. The sympathy she had offered moments before was revealed as a brittle facade. The Luna is mad with sorrow. Her wolf is unhinged. Seize her before she brings a curse upon us all. Two of the pack's sentinels, hulking warriors who had served Jorvin faithfully, flinched at her command. Their eyes darted from Maeve to Kaelin and then to me. They saw not a mad woman, but the Luna they had honored for a decade. The scent of their conflict, loyalty warring with duty, was sharp and acrid. They did not move. Kaelin raised a single commanding hand. The gesture was small, economical, but it radiated an authority that stopped Maeve's tirade cold. He took a slow, deliberate step toward me, the snow crunching under his boots with grim finality. The crowd parted for him again, an unconscious act of deference to the power he carried so easily. He stopped barely an arm's length away, close enough that the heat from the pyre was trapped between us. His shadow fell over me, a physical weight. I had to tilt my head back to meet his gaze, and I refused to show him the tremor that had started in my hands. His eyes were no longer flint. They were burning silver, his wolf staring out from behind the bars of his humanity. It was an ancient predatory intelligence that looked at me, sizing up a threat. Your grief is a storm, Hyalus, he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that vibrated through the ground. Do not let it drown you, and do not let it drown this pack in your delusion. This is not delusion, I countered, my own voice steady despite the frantic pounding of my heart. My wolf was coiled tight inside me, a predator ready to spring. She recognized the threat in him, the raw masculine dominance that sought to crush her own. This is clarity. The bond is not a chain that breaks upon death. It is a root that grows deeper. His strength is mine now. The pack deserves the leadership it knows, the heart it trusted. The pack deserves a true alpha, he snarled, taking another step. He was in my space now, his scent an overwhelming wave of frost, iron, and something else. Something wild and dark, like a storm gathering over a frozen lake. It was a scent meant to intimidate, to force submission. It deserves a leader whose claim is written in the sacred laws of blood, not the ravings of a grieving female. His proximity was a physical assault. Every instinct screamed at me to step back, to yield the ground I had just claimed. To do so would be to lose everything. I held my ground, my chin high. I let my own wolf rise to the surface, letting the heat of her gaze meet the ice of his. Jorvin's blood runs in our pups, I said, the words a low blow I hadn't intended to strike. The mention of the children we could never have was a shard of glass in my own heart, but I would use any weapon I had. If I had borne him a son, would you still be standing here, cloaked in your ambition? His jaw tightened, the scar tissue pulling white against his skin. A muscle worked furiously beneath the mark. For the first time, a crack appeared in his glacial control. I had touched a nerve. His scent sharpened, laced with a flicker of raw anger. The moon did not grant you that gift, he bit out, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper for my ears alone. Do not use your barrenness as both a shield and a sword. It is unbefitting. The insult landed like a physical strike. Cold fire spread through my veins. He had spoken the pack's deepest taboo, the silent shame I had carried for years. Barren. The word was a brand on my soul. But instead of making me crumble, it forged my rage into something hard and sharp. And it is unbefitting for a cousin to call himself king while the queen still draws breath, I whispered back, my voice dripping with venom. Our gazes locked in a silent war. In that moment, the pack, the pyre, the entire world fell away. There was only the clash of our wills, the ice of his wolf against the fire of mine. It was something more primal than a simple power struggle. A strange, terrifying current passed between us. A shock of recognition. His wolf saw mine, not as a broken Luna, but as a rival, an equal. The realization flickered in his silver eyes, a confusing mix of fury and something I couldn't name. It felt like the split second before a lightning strike, a moment of pure, elemental energy that was both terrifying and intoxicating. He was the first to break the gaze, tearing his eyes away with a barely perceptible flinch. He turned his head, addressing the pack, his voice regaining its cold, commanding tone. But I had seen the crack. I knew I had unsettled him. The Luna is unwell, he announced, his words carrying to the furthest edges of the clearing. She speaks from a place of pain. We will honor her grief, but we will not indulge her fantasy. The succession stands. As Alpha, my first command is that the Luna be escorted to her chambers to rest. It was a clever move. He was not being a tyrant. He was being considerate. He was painting me as a hysterical woman who needed to be managed, stripping my claim of its power and reducing it to a symptom of female weakness. The murmurs in the pack shifted. I could smell their uncertainty turning to acquiescence. They were used to following commands, and Kalen's voice was the voice of an alpha. I will not be dismissed, I said, my voice ringing out, clear and defiant. I stepped around him, forcing him to turn back to me, forcing the pack's eyes back to our conflict. I will not be sent to my chambers like a misbehaving child. My claim was not a request. It was a declaration. Then what do you propose? It was Maeve who spoke, her voice like grinding stones. That we abandon the laws that have kept us safe for generations. That we follow a Luna into madness. She-wolves do not lead. They nurture. They heal. It is not their place. Our world is changing, I shot back, turning to face her, to face them all. Our enemies multiply. The Valerius pack to the south grows bolder. The human hunters press closer to our borders every season. Jorvin knew this. He knew that strength was not just about claws and fangs. It is about cunning. It is about heart. It is about a bond with this pack that goes deeper than blood. I placed a hand over my heart. I held that bond with him. I hold it now. Kalen offers you the strength of a hammer, meant only to shatter. I offer you the strength of a shield, meant to protect. A few heads nodded in the crowd. I saw it. The younger she-wolves, their eyes bright. A few of the older warriors, men who had seen Jorvin and I rule together, who knew our partnership was more than ceremony. The seeds of doubt I'd planted were sprouting. Kalen saw it too. The fury in his eyes deepened into something colder, more calculated. He saw his easy succession slipping through his fingers. He knew he could not force the issue without dividing the pack, a weakness our enemies would exploit in a heartbeat. He was trapped. And a trapped wolf is the most dangerous kind. He strode to stand beside Elder Maeve, a united front of tradition and power. His gaze swept over the pack, reclaiming their attention before settling on me. The false consideration was gone, replaced by the chilling authority of a warlord. You speak of laws changing, he said, his voice echoing in the cold night. But there are older laws. Laws that are not so easily set aside. Laws of trial. If you truly believe the spirit of the Alpha resides in you, if you truly believe you have a claim, then you will not fear proving it. A collective gasp went through the pack. A fearful energy, thick and suffocating, descended on the clearing. I felt my blood run cold. I knew what he was suggesting. There were ancient rites, brutal and often fatal, designed to settle disputes so profound they threatened to tear a pack apart. They had not been invoked in centuries. Maeve's lips curled into a triumphant, cruel smile. "Yes," she hissed, "the right of blood and bone." The name fell into the silence like a stone into a deep well. It was a death sentence, a trial of 3 parts, designed to test a shifter's body, mind, and spirit to their absolute breaking points. No one in living memory had survived it. It was a legend told to frighten pups, a relic of a more savage age. Kaylin's silver eyes pinned me in place. There was no escape in them, no mercy. He had found his way out. He was offering me a chance to prove my claim, knowing it would be my death. He would get the throne, his hands would be clean, and tradition would be upheld in the most brutal way imaginable. "You wish to wear the crown, Hyallis?" he challenged, his voice a silken threat. "Then you must prove you can bear its weight. You will face the hunt, the silence, and the heart. You will prove your strength, your endurance, and your connection to the pack spirit, or you will perish." He paused, letting the weight of his words crush the hope that had flickered within the pack. "That is the law. Do you accept the trial, or do you yield your claim?" The weight of 100 pairs of eyes pressed down on me, a physical force threatening to drive me to my knees. The name of the trial, Blood and Bone, echoed in the sudden, tomb-like silence. It was a specter, a campfire story meant to curdle the blood of pups. And Kaylin had just given it flesh. My own blood turned to ice in my veins. My human mind screamed, a frantic litany of impossibilities. The hunt, the silence, the heart, they were not mere tests. They were executions veiled in ritual. But my wolf, the beast he had so easily dismissed, was not afraid. She tasted the challenge in the air, the scent of his arrogance, and she met it with a low, rumbling growl that vibrated in my soul. She would rather die on her feet than live on her knees. She would rather be torn apart in the heart of the forest than fade into gray obscurity in a quiet room, haunted by the ghost of what she once was. Lifting my chin, I met Kaylin's silver stare across the space that now felt like a battlefield. The firelight carved harsh lines on his face, turning his scar into a jagged ravine. He expected me to falter, to crumble, to take the coward's path he had so graciously offered. The pack expected it. They were already breathing again, their collective breath a sigh of pity for the poor, mad Luna. "I accept," I said. The 2 words were not loud, but they cut through the whispers and the crackling flames like shards of obsidian. They landed with the force of a physical blow. The pity in the air curdled into stunned disbelief. Elder Maeve's triumphant sneer froze on her face. Even Kaylin, for the briefest of moments, let a flicker of genuine surprise break through his icy composure. He had not believed I would call his bluff. My voice gained strength, fueled by the wild, defiant spirit of my wolf. "I accept the right of blood and bone. I will face your hunt. I will endure your silence. I will claim the heart. And when I stand victorious on the other side, this pack will have its alpha." I held his gaze, a silent promise of the war to come. Then, without waiting for a dismissal, I turned my back on him, on the elders, on the gaping faces of my pack. I walked away from the pyre, away from the ashes of my husband and the life that had been stolen from me. Each step was deliberate, measured. I could feel their eyes on my back, 1,000 questions burning in their wake. I did not falter. My spine was a rod of iron. The performance was over. The battle had just begun. The long walk back to the Alpha's lodge was a journey through a sea of ghosts. The pack parted for me, a silent, fearful wave. No one spoke. No one met my eye. They averted their gazes as if looking at me directly might invite the same fate. Their whispers followed me, a sibilant tide of speculation and fear. Madness. A death wish. Kaylin will be Alpha by moonrise tomorrow. She shames Jorvin's memory. The words were like tiny, stinging insects, but I refused to let them bite. I finally reached the heavy oak doors of the lodge. I had shared with Horvin for 12 years. Pushing them open, I stepped into the suffocating silence of my home. It was worse than the whispers. Here, his presence was a physical entity. His scent, pine and rich earth, and the faint metallic smell of his forge clung to the firs and the timber walls. A half-empty horn of mead sat on the great table by the hearth, a forgotten remnant of a life that had ended 3 days ago. My composure, so carefully constructed, finally shattered. A sob tore from my throat, raw and ragged. I stumbled to the hearth, my knees giving way, and I sank onto the great bearskin rug where he and I had lain so many nights, planning, dreaming, loving. I curled into myself, my body shaking with the force of my grief and my terror. What had I done? We did what we must, my wolf soothed, her presence a warm weight in my soul. We chose to fight. He would be proud. I buried my face in the thick fur, inhaling his fading scent, anchoring myself to his memory. Jorvin. He would have raged against this injustice. He would have laughed at the elders' rigid adherence to laws they barely understood. The strength of the pack is not in its laws, Hylas, he'd once told me, his hand in my hair, but in its heart. And you are its heart. But he was gone, and Kalen was a man who saw the pack not as a family, but as a weapon. He would hone it, sharpen it, and wield it for his own glory. He would sacrifice the weak, discard the old, and turn our home into a barracks. The thought sent a fresh wave of resolve through me, cooling the fire of my fear. I was not just fighting for a title. I was fighting for the soul of my pack, for Jorvin's legacy. A soft knock came at the door, so tentative I almost thought I'd imagined it. I rose slowly, my muscles aching, and smoothed down my leathers. Wiping the tears from my face with the back of my hand, I went to the door and pulled it open. A young she-wolf, Elara, stood on the threshold, her head bowed. She was one of the pack's junior healers, barely 20 winters old, with wide, frightened eyes and hands that nervously clutched a small ceramic pot. "Luna," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Forgive the intrusion. I heard you were unwell. I brought a balm for the nerves." It was a flimsy excuse, but the kindness behind it was a balm in itself. I looked into her face and saw not pity, but a desperate, fearful hope. She was one of the few who had not looked away. "Thank you, Elara," I said, my voice hoarse. "Come in." She scurried inside, keeping her eyes down, as if she were committing a crime. She placed the pot on the table and wrung her hands. "They are all saying you have lost your mind to grief," she whispered, her words rushing out in a torrent. "Elder Maeve is telling everyone that Kalen is showing you mercy, giving you a warrior's death instead of letting you fade in shame. They are twisting it, Luna. They are making your strength sound like weakness." Of course they were. It was how they controlled the narrative, how they maintained power. "And what do you think, Elara?" I asked quietly. She finally lifted her head, and her wide, doe-like eyes were filled with a fierce light that surprised me. "I think I heard an alpha's howl tonight," she said, her voice dropping lower. My wolf heard it. She bowed. "I am not the only one." A flicker of hope ignited in the cold cavern of my chest. "Be careful, little one," I warned her gently. "Such thoughts are dangerous right now." "Courage is always dangerous," she replied, a flash of Jorvin's spirit in her words. She took a step closer. "The rite is ancient. No one remembers the truth of it. Only the fearsome legends. But there are old texts, in the healer's den. Maeve guards them, but she is not the only one with a key. Be careful, High Alice. Kalen and the elders will not be fighting fair. They don't want a trial. They want a sacrifice." Before I could respond, a heavy footstep sounded on the porch outside. Elara's face went white with terror. She gave me a panicked look, bowed her head, and scurried out a side door just as a sharp, authoritative knock echoed through the room. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew who it was. The scent preceded him, cold and sharp, an invasive winter wind that snuffed out the lingering warmth of Jorvin's memory. I took a deep breath, straightened my spine, and opened the main door. Kalen stood there, a monolith of shadow against the moonlit snow. He had shed his ceremonial leathers for a simple, dark tunic that did little to hide the raw power in his shoulders and chest. His flint-gray eyes swept over the room, a conqueror surveying his new territory, before they landed on me. "I thought it best we speak privately," he said, his voice a low growl. He stepped inside without invitation, forcing me to move back. He closed the door behind him, plunging the room into the intimate glow of the hearth fire. The space, my sanctuary, suddenly felt like a cage. "You have said all you need to say, Kalen," I said, crossing my arms over my chest. He ignored my words, his gaze falling on the second mead horn on the table, the one Alara had left in her haste. He picked it up, his large hand dwarfing it, and sniffed the contents. "A healing balm. Are you wounded already?" "Only by the ambition of lesser men," I retorted. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, a cold, unsettling sight. It did not reach his eyes. "You have courage, I will grant you that. Jorvin always did admire your fire. He thought it made you strong. He was wrong. It only makes you reckless." He placed the horn down and walked toward the hearth, toward Jorvin's chair. He didn't sit, but rested a hand on its high, carved back, an unconscious gesture of possession that made my wolf snarl. "I am giving you one last chance, Hyalis," he said, turning to face me. The firelight played over the sharp planes of his face, making his scars seem to writhe in the shadows. "For Jorvin's sake, yield. Tell the pack your grief spoke for you. I will silence Maeve and the others. You will be granted the honor due to a Luna Dowager. You will want for nothing." His mercy was more insulting than his threats. "I will want for nothing because I will be nothing," I said, my voice dripping with scorn. "A ghost you keep comfortable in her cage. I am not one of your hunting hounds, Kalen, to be retired to a warm kennel when my purpose is served. I am the Luna of this pack, or I am its alpha." He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The air between us grew thick, charged with a strange, hostile energy. It was the same current I had felt by the pyre, a primal friction between two dominant wills. "So be it," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "The first trial begins at dawn. The hunt of the silver stag, a creature of myth, a direct descendant of the first pack's totem, a sacred beast. You will hunt it, alone, unarmed." I kept my face a mask of stone, though my blood ran cold, unarmed, alone. He took a step closer, his scent of frost and iron invading my senses, making it hard to breathe. "The stag is faster than any wolf and knows every shadow in this forest. To fail to catch it is an insult to the moon spirit herself. But that is not your only concern." He was so close now I could feel the heat radiating from his body, a stark contrast to the coldness of his presence. His silver eyes bored into mine. "You will be given a 12-hour start," he murmured, his voice a venomous secret. "And then I will hunt you." Dawn broke not with warmth, but with a blade of frigid gray light that sliced through the lingering darkness. I stood at the edge of the great forest, the ancient woods that bordered our territory, feeling as though I stood on the edge of my own grave. I had not slept. The night had been a long, waking nightmare spent staring into the dying embers of my hearth. Jorvin's absence a hollow ache in my bones. Kalen's threat a serpent coiled in my gut. The entire pack was assembled behind me, a silent, grim-faced gallery come to witness the beginning of the end. Their scents were a suffocating cloud of pity, morbid curiosity, and fear. They did not see a contender. They saw a sacrifice. Elder Maeve stood near the front, her face a mask of pious solemnity that did not quite hide the glint of triumph in her eyes. And then there was Kalen. He moved through the crowd and they parted for him as if for a god. He was dressed for the hunt in dark, hardened leathers, exuding an aura of lethal competence. He stopped before me, carrying a small stone bowl filled with dark ash from Dwarven's pyre. The symbolism was a deliberate cruelty. From the ashes of my love, he would consecrate my death. "The rite begins," he announced, his voice carrying across the silent clearing. He dipped 2 fingers into the bowl. His gaze was cold, impersonal, but as he reached for me, I saw a flicker of something else in their silver depths, a warning, a final, unspoken offer to yield. I held my ground, my expression a mask of defiance. His fingers, surprisingly warm against the icy skin of my forehead, pressed the ash into my flesh. It was a brand, a mark of the condemned. His touch was brief, yet it sent a jolt of hostile energy through me. A clash of wills transmitted through that simple contact. His scent of winter and iron was overpowering, a stark invasion of my senses. "May the moon find you worthy, Hyalus," he said, the formal words a mockery of the fate he had planned for me. Without another word, I turned from him and plunged into the shadows of the forest. The moment the ancient trees swallowed me, a profound silence fell. The sounds of the pack, the crackling of their morning fires, all of it vanished, replaced by the whisper of the wind through the pines and the frantic drumming of my own heart. Alone, unarmed, my only weapons were my senses and the lessons Jorvin had taught me over the years. My bare feet, already numb with cold, barely made a sound on the carpet of frozen pine needles. The first hour was a blur of motion. I ran, putting as much distance as I could between myself and the clearing. I needed to be deep within the territory before I began the true hunt. Kaelin had given me 12 hours. It was a generous head start that felt more like a taunt than a mercy. As my body warmed with the exertion, my mind cleared. Panic gave way to a cold, sharp focus. My human fear receded, and my wolf's instincts sharpened. The forest was not an enemy. It was my home. I knew its secrets, its hidden paths, its language. "The silver stag is not a beast of flesh and blood alone," Jorvin's voice echoed in my memory, a ghost at my shoulder. "It is a spirit. It does not run from the hunter. It flows away. You cannot track its prints. You must track the way the moonlight bends around it." But it was daylight. I had to rely on something else. Scent. I stopped, closing my eyes, tilting my head back, and breathing in the soul of the forest. I filtered through the layers of scent, damp earth, rotting leaves, the sharp tang of pine sap, the musky trail of a fox that had passed hours ago. I pushed them all aside, searching for something otherworldly, something that did not belong. And then I caught it. It was faint, a mere whisper on the wind, but it was unmistakable. Ozone, like the air after a lightning strike. The clean, pure scent of running water over cold stones. And something else. Something that smelled like moonlight given substance. It was the scent of magic. The scent of the stag. My heart leaped. It was real. For a moment, a sliver of doubt had told me Kaelin was sending me on a fool's errand, chasing a myth until he came to claim his forfeit. But the stag was here. Hope, a fragile, dangerous thing, unfurled within me. I began to move, no longer running blindly, but flowing with the currents of the wind, my senses stretched to their limit. I was a predator now, my grief and fear burned away by the pure, primal purpose of the hunt. For hours I tracked the ethereal scent, a silver thread leading me deeper into the oldest part of the woods, a place of moss-choked giants and deep, silent shadows. The trail grew stronger, the scent of ozone so thick I could almost taste it. It was close. I moved to the crest of a ridge, overlooking a secluded hollow, where a waterfall cascaded over mossy rocks into a crystal-clear pool. The air hummed with energy. This was a sacred place. And there, drinking from the pool, was the stag. My breath caught in my throat. It was more magnificent than any legend had described. Its coat was not white, but the color of spun moonlight, seeming to shift and shimmer even in the flat daylight. Its antlers were like branches of polished silver, and its eyes, when it lifted its head, were pools of liquid starlight. It was not a creature of this world. It saw me. Our eyes met across the hollow. There was no fear in its gaze, only a calm, ancient intelligence. This was not a beast to be killed. It was a spirit to be communed with. The trial was not about a kill. It was about worthiness. I had to touch it, to be accepted by it. That was the true test. Slowly, holding my hands out in a gesture of peace, I began to walk down the slope. The stag watched me, its head high, its magnificent form perfectly still. I took another step, my heart a wild drum against my ribs. And then the world tilted. A new scent hit me, sharp and foul, cutting through the sacred air of the hollow. It was the bitter, metallic smell of iron and the cloying, acrid odor of wolfsbane. A hunter's scent mask. It was old, several hours old, but it was strong, and it was deliberately laid in a perimeter around the hollow. A trap. Not for me, for the stag. Rage, pure and black, washed over me, so potent it was nauseating. This wasn't a trial, it was a setup. Kaelin or Maeve or one of their sycophants had been here long before me. They had herded the stag to this location, trapping it within a scent line that no true wolf would cross, a line that would sicken and weaken the sacred beast. They had not trusted the hunt. They had corrupted it, rigged it. The stag, agitated by the foul scent I had disturbed, snorted and bounded away, its silver form vanishing into the trees like a wisp of smoke. The scent of betrayal was a poison in my lungs. My hope turned to ash. They had never intended for me to succeed. They had laid a path for me to follow, leading me on a false quest, wasting my precious time until Kaelin's own hunt could begin. I stood there, trembling with a fury so profound it eclipsed my grief. My wolf clawed at the inside of my skin, screaming for release, for vengeance. They had desecrated this sacred place. They had defiled the rite. They had underestimated me. They thought I was hunting a ghost. They did not realize that I had become one. I checked the sun. The 12 hours were nearly gone. He would be coming soon. My original plan, to find the stag and win the trial, was a fool's dream. It was time for a new plan. I was no longer the hunted. I would no longer play their game. I left the hollow, but I did not try to pick up the stag's trail. Instead, I began to work, my movements swift and silent. I doubled back on my own path, using the tricks Jorvin had taught me to obscure my tracks. I climbed rocks, waded through icy streams, used the wind to carry my scent in the wrong direction. I was not running. I was preparing the battlefield. As twilight began to bleed through the forest canopy, casting the world in shades of purple and gray, I found my spot. A narrow ravine, choked with fallen logs and thorny briars. A death trap for anyone moving at speed. I settled myself in the deepest shadows, my back against a cold granite boulder, and I waited. I didn't have to wait long. His scent came first, a clean, cold spear on the evening air, frost and iron. He was moving fast, with the long, ground-eating lope of a wolf, but he was in his human form, a calculated choice. He wanted to face me as a man, to reinforce his dominance, his right to judge me. He appeared at the edge of the ravine, a tall, dark silhouette against the dying light. He was a perfect predator, his movements fluid and silent. He paused, his head tilted, his senses tasting the air. His flint-gray eyes scanned the shadows, and for a terrifying second, I thought he had seen me. "Your time is up, Hyalus." His voice echoed in the ravine, low and resonant. "The game is over. Show yourself." I remained perfectly still, slowing my breathing, my heartbeat, becoming a part of the stone at my back. Let him think I was afraid. Let him think I was hiding. He leaped down into the ravine with impossible grace, landing without a sound. He began to move through the tangle of logs and thorns, his confidence absolute. He was so sure of my fear, of his victory. "Did you truly think you could win?" He murmured, more to himself than to me. "A Luna playing an alpha's game. Jorvin indulged you, but I will not. Your pride will be your undoing." He was 10 feet away. 5. He passed the log I was hiding behind, his back to me for a single fleeting second. Now. I exploded from the shadows, not with a roar, but in utter silence. I did not attack. I ran. I burst from my hiding place and scrambled up the far side of the ravine, my fingers and bare feet finding purchase on the cold rock. He whirled around, shock and fury warring on his face. He had been so focused on the hunt, he hadn't anticipated the ambush. He snarled, a guttural sound of pure rage, and launched himself after me. But I had planned for this. The path I took was treacherous, designed to slow him. He was stronger and faster, but I was lighter, more nimble. I reached the top of the ravine just as his hand closed around my ankle, his grip a band of iron. He yanked me back. I fell crying out as my body slammed against the hard earth. He was on me in an instant, his weight pinning me, his face inches from mine. His eyes were no longer flint, but blazing silver, his wolf looking out, furious at being tricked. "You would run," he snarled, his breath hot against my face. "You will face your failure." His hand went to my throat, not to choke, but to hold, to dominate, to force my submission. And in that moment, pressed to the cold earth with the full weight of his power upon me, with the scent of his rage filling my senses, something inside me broke. The last thread of human restraint snapped. My wolf, caged and furious, surged forward. A guttural growl ripped from my throat, a sound that was not human. His eyes widened in shock as he felt the power explode from me. It wasn't a choice. It was a desperate, primal instinct to survive, to fight, to answer the dominance pinning me down with the dominance of my own. The shift was agony and ecstasy, the scream of my bones breaking and reforming, the searing heat of my muscles tearing and knitting themselves into a new, more powerful form. He scrambled back, his grip on me lost in the violent transformation. Where a woman had been, a wolf now stood. My fur was not the brown of my hair, but a pale, ghostly silver, the color of the moon that had witnessed my vow. I was leaner than the other pack wolves, built for speed and cunning rather than brute force. I rose to my full height, my lips peeling back from my teeth in a silent snarl. My eyes, glowing with a cold blue light, met his. He stared, for the first time, not at Jorvin's widow, not at a grieving Luna, but at a rival he had never seen before. His own wolf was rising, the silver in his eyes consuming the gray. The hunter had become the hunted, and in the heart of the dying woods, the true trial was about to begin. The air in the ravine crackled, thick with a tension that was more than just the clash of two rivals. It was the collision of two worlds, his, forged in tradition and brute strength, and mine, born from the ashes of love and defiance. In my wolf form, the world was a symphony of sensation. I could taste the iron in his blood, smell the surge of adrenaline that tightened his skin, hear the frantic, predatory rhythm of his heart. He was still a man, trapped for a moment between awe and fury, and that moment was my only advantage. I did not wait for him to shift. I lunged. It was not a full-force attack meant to maim or kill. It was a feint, a test. I darted in, my fangs flashing, and snapped at the air just inches from his throat. He reacted with breathtaking speed, throwing himself backward, his human form clumsy compared to my lupine grace. He stumbled over a fallen log, his eyes wide with a feral light, as his own wolf fought for control. "Never fight an alpha on his terms," Jorvin's voice was a calm whisper in the storm of my mind. "Strength against strength is a fool's battle. Use the terrain, use your speed, use their pride against them." While Kalen was still recovering his balance, I was gone, a silver streak melting into the deepening gloom. The forest was my ally. I wove through the ancient trees, my paws silent on the mossy ground. I was not running from him. I was leading him into a dance where I controlled the steps. The agony of his own shift tore through the forest, a sound of ripping flesh and snapping bone that ended in a guttural roar of pure unleashed power. A moment later, his howl ripped through the twilight, a sound of raw dominance and furious challenge. It was a command for me to stop, to submit, to face him. I answered with a howl of my own. It was not as deep or as powerful as his, but it was sharp and clear, a note of defiant freedom that echoed through the ravines. It was not a challenge to his strength, but a mockery of his control. You do not command me. You do not own this forest. The hunt was on. He was a force of nature, a shadow of raw muscle and black fur that flowed through the trees like a river of night. He was larger than any wolf I had ever seen, a beast built for breaking lines and crushing enemies. His power was a palpable thing, a wave of pressure that preceded him. But he was built for the open field, for the glorious charge. Here, in the tangled heart of the old woods, his size was a hindrance. I led him through the tightest spaces I could find, through thorny thickets that tore at his thick pelt and narrow gaps between ancient moss-covered boulders. I heard him snarl in frustration as he was forced to slow down, to smash his way through obstacles I slipped past with ease. I stayed just ahead of him, a tantalizing flicker of silver in the gloom, always just out of reach. It was a dangerous game. If he caught me, his superior strength would end this fight in seconds. The moon began to rise, its light filtering through the canopy in ethereal shafts, painting the forest floor in shifting patterns of silver and black. The world became a dreamscape, and our deadly chase became a primal ballet. He was darkness, I was light. He was fury, I was cunning. We broke out into a small moon-drenched clearing. I skidded to a halt, turning to face him. He burst through the tree line a moment later, his great chest heaving, his black fur matted with leaves and briars. His eyes were burning coals of silver fire, and a low growl rumbled in his chest like distant thunder. He saw this as his chance, an open space where my speed would not save me. He charged. It was like watching a mountain move. He covered the ground between us with terrifying speed. I held my ground until the very last second, until I could feel the heat of his breath, smell the raw, earthy scent of his rage. Then I dropped. I fell to the ground, tucked and rolled, letting his momentum carry him over me. His massive form blotted out the moon for a heartbeat, a terrifying eclipse of black fur and snapping teeth. As he thundered past, I surged to my feet and launched myself at his hind leg. My fangs sank into the thick muscle above his hock. It was not a disabling blow, but it was a shock, an insult. He roared, a sound of pain and outrage, and spun around trying to catch me. But I was already gone, darting back toward the safety of the trees. He limped for a few steps, his pride wounded far more than his leg. The look in his eyes was no longer just fury. It was a grudging, hateful respect. I was not the hysterical Luna. I was not the grieving widow. I was a wolf, and I was a threat. He stopped, his head low, his body coiled like a massive spring. He was done chasing. He was changing his tactics. I watched him from the shadows, my own muscles trembling with adrenaline. The fight was far from over. I had stung him, but I had also enraged him. He lifted his head and scented the air, his great black snout questing. He was ignoring my visual trail. He was hunting me by scent alone now, his superior senses filtering through the forest's distractions to lock onto my unique signature. It was a far more dangerous game. He would no longer be fooled by my feints and tricks. He would simply follow the invisible thread of my presence until he cornered me. I had to do something he would not expect, something no sane wolf would do. I broke from the tree line and ran, not away from him, but directly toward the sound of the waterfall, towards the hollow of the silver stag, the place that reeked of the hunter's foul scent trap. He would expect me to avoid it, to flee from the sickening stench of iron and wolfsbane. As I neared the hollow, the smell hit me, a nauseating wave that made my wolf's stomach churn. It was a poison to our kind, anathema. I forced myself to push through it, my senses screaming in protest. I plunged into the stream, letting the icy water wash over me, hoping it would help mask my scent. Kalen's howl of confusion echoed from behind me. He had followed my scent to the edge of the tainted area and stopped. He couldn't understand why I would run into a trap. His hesitation gave me precious seconds. I scrambled up the slick, mossy rocks beside the waterfall, my claws finding purchase in the cracks. The spray soaked my fur, chilling me to the bone, but it also washed away my scent, replacing it with the clean, powerful smell of stone and rushing water. At the top of the waterfall, I found a shallow cave hidden behind the cascade, a secret place Jorvin had shown me once. I slipped inside, my body shaking uncontrollably from cold and exertion. From my hiding place, I watched as Kalen, a great black shadow, entered the hollow. He moved cautiously, his nose to the ground, his body language a tapestry of confusion and suspicion. He circled the clearing, his powerful form tense. He knew I was here. He could feel it. But he could not find me. The water, the tainted scent line, it was all scrambling his senses. The frustration radiating from him was a tangible thing. He let out a low guttural snarl and clawed at the earth, tearing up chunks of moss and soil. He was an alpha unaccustomed to being thwarted. He was a creature of absolute power, and I had turned that power into a weakness. Then he stopped. He stood perfectly still, his head raised, his body rigid. He was no longer trying to scent me or see me. He was listening to the heartbeat of the forest, listening for the one rhythm that was out of place, mine. My heart, which had been hammering against my ribs, suddenly felt like a traitorous drum, beating out my location. I tried to slow it, to calm the frantic pace, but the cold and the fear were too strong. His head turned slowly, his burning silver eyes scanning the waterfall. He couldn't see me through the curtain of water, but he knew. The hunter's instinct, ancient and unerring, was guiding him. He took a step toward the falls, then another. This was the end of the game. There was nowhere left to run. My cunning had only bought me time. In the small cave, his strength would be overwhelming. I could not fight him. I could not flee. As he prepared to leap through the curtain of water, a new scent filled the air. It was not his scent, or mine, or the foul taint of the hunter's trap. It was the scent of ozone and moonlight, the scent of magic. From the trees on the far side of the clearing, the silver stag emerged. It stepped into the moonlight, its coat shimmering, its eyes like pools of starlight. It was not afraid. It walked with a calm, regal grace, its silver antlers held high. Kalen froze, his attack forgotten. He turned to face the sacred beast, a low growl of disbelief rumbling in his chest. The stag did not look at him. Its luminous gaze found me in my hiding place behind the water. It saw me, and it held my gaze. In that moment, a sense of profound peace washed over me, a silent communication passing between us. It was an acknowledgement, a blessing. Then it lowered its head, and with a soft, ethereal sound, it knelt. The sacred beast, the spirit of the forest, the totem of our people, was bowing to me. Kalen stared, his great wolf body trembling with a mixture of shock and awe. The rite of the hunt was not about catching the stag. It was about being chosen by it. Slowly, I emerged from behind the waterfall, my silver form dripping and shaking. I walked into the moonlight, my head held high, and stopped before the kneeling stag. It radiated a warmth that pushed back the bone-deep cold. I lowered my own head in a gesture of respect and gratitude. I had not won by claw or fang. I had won by wit and desperation, and the spirit of the forest itself had borne witness. I turned my head and looked at Kalen. The black wolf stood frozen, his silver eyes wide with an emotion I had never seen in him before. Utter defeat. His fury was gone, replaced by a stunned, unwilling reverence for the impossible sight before him. The first trial was over, and I, the broken Luna, had won. The shift back was a brutal, grinding agony. My wolf receded, her essence pulling away from my bones, leaving behind the fragile, aching limitations of my human form. I collapsed onto the damp, cold earth of the hollow, naked and trembling. My body a tapestry of bruises and deep, burning scratches. The sacred warmth of the stag's presence had vanished with it, leaving me alone in the pre-dawn chill with my vanquished rival. Kalen, too, was human again. He stood across the clearing, his back to me, his broad shoulders rigid with tension. The moonlight limned the powerful muscles of his back and the jagged line of his scar. A profound, vibrating silence stretched between us, broken only by the eternal rush of the waterfall. He had not spoken a word since the stag had vanished. He hadn't needed to. The scent rolling off him was a storm of shattered pride, disbelief, and a grudging, furious respect that was perhaps the most unsettling thing of all. I pushed myself into a sitting position, my muscles screaming in protest. I wrapped my arms around my knees, trying to ward off the cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. I had won the first trial. The laws he himself had invoked declared it so. But winning a battle and winning a war were two very different things. The look in his eyes when he had seen the stag kneel had not been one of surrender. It had been one of recalibration. Finally, he moved. He turned slowly, his face a mask carved from granite in the pale light. His gray eyes, now devoid of his wolf's silver fire, were flat and unreadable. He walked over to where his discarded leathers lay and pulled on his breeches, his movements stiff and economical. He did not offer me my own clothes, which lay in a heap near the ravine's edge. The small, deliberate discourtesy was a statement in itself. You may have won the trial, but you are still the weaker sex in my eyes. I forced my aching body to stand. I would not cower before him. I walked, my head held high, to my own discarded clothing and pulled on the tunic and leggings. My fingers clumsy with cold. Every movement was an act of defiance. The right is corrupt, he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that seemed to be torn from the earth itself. He wasn't looking at me, but at the waterfall, as if he could still see the ghost of what had happened here. Maeve spoke of it. The stag is a creature of the Luna, of the she-wolf spirit. The trial was always weighted in your favor. It proves nothing of your strength to lead. It proves that the spirits of this forest find me worthy, I countered, my voice raw. Something they did not find in you. You hunted to kill. I hunted to understand. That is the difference between a tyrant and a leader. He turned on me then, his eyes flashing with a spark of their earlier fire. Do not speak to me of leadership. You who would lead this pack with sentiment and whispers of the old magic. We are surrounded by enemies who understand nothing but the language of blood and steel. Your understanding will get us all slaughtered. He took a step closer, his larger frame once again casting me in shadow. His proximity was a physical pressure, a reminder of the raw power he still possessed, a power that had nothing to do with sacred rites. This changes nothing, he snarled, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. There are 2 trials yet to come. The silence will break your mind, and the heart will break your spirit. You have won nothing but a brief, painful reprieve. Before I could form a reply, the sounds of the approaching pack reached us. The sentinels he had posted at the edge of the woods, there to ensure no one interfered, were coming. They had heard our howls, the sounds of our savage battle, and were coming to collect the victor and the vanquished. They would be expecting to find my broken body. Kalen's jaw tightened. He shot me a look of pure venom. He had wanted no witnesses to my victory. He had wanted to control the narrative, to twist my success into a fluke. The first of the warriors, a grizzled veteran named Garrick, broke through the tree line. He skidded to a halt, his eyes wide as he took in the scene. He saw Kalen, bruised and bleeding from the bite on his leg. He saw me, exhausted and scratched but standing tall. And he saw the undeniable truth in the air between us. He had been one of Corvin's most loyal men. "Luna," he breathed, his voice filled with awe. "The first trial is complete," I said, my voice ringing with an authority I did not feel but had to project. "The spirit of the stag has given its judgment." Garrick's eyes flickered to Kalen, and for the first time, he did not look at him with the deference due to an alpha in waiting. He looked at him as an equal, or perhaps no longer an equal. Garrick lowered his head to me in a gesture of profound respect. "We will escort you back to the lodge, Alpha," he said. The word hung in the air, a bell tolling the dawn of a new age. Alpha. Kalen's entire body went rigid. A low, barely audible growl escaped his lips. The look he shot Garrick was lethal, but the old warrior did not flinch. He had chosen his side. The walk back was a surreal procession. News traveled faster than wildfire. By the time we reached the edge of the village, it seemed the entire pack was awake, their faces pale and shocked in the growing light of dawn. They stared as I walked past, flanked by Garrick and the other sentinels. They saw the weariness in my bones, but they also saw the unwavering set of my jaw. And they saw Kalen walking several paces behind me, his limp more pronounced, his face a thundercloud of fury. They didn't need to be told what had happened. They could smell it, the scent of my victory, faint and ethereal like ozone and moonlight, clung to me, and the scent of his defeat, a bitter metallic tang of rage and humiliation, followed him like a shroud. Whispers erupted in my wake. Alara, the young healer, stood near her doorway, her hands pressed to her mouth, her eyes shining with tears of joy. Elder Maeve, however, stood before the council lodge, her face a mask of disbelief that was slowly hardening into pure hatred. Our eyes met, and in their depths, I saw a promise of the pain that was yet to come. She would not accept this. She would find a way to destroy me. When I reached my own lodge, Garrick posted the 2 sentinels at my door. "No one enters without your permission, Alpha," he said, his voice a low, steady rumble of loyalty. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Inside, the silence that greeted me was different. It was no longer the suffocating silence of grief, but the calm, quiet space of a sanctuary. I was so tired I could barely stand. I stripped off my torn, filthy leathers and went to the basin of water. As I washed the blood and dirt from my skin, I saw my reflection. I looked different. The woman who stared back at me was not the same one who had walked into the forest yesterday. Her eyes were older, filled with a knowledge of violence and survival that had not been there before. There was a new hardness in the line of her mouth, a new strength in the set of her shoulders. I had walked into the woods as Jorvin's widow. I had walked out as myself. A soft knock came at the door. I wrapped myself in a heavy fur robe and called out, "Enter!" It was Alara. She carried a tray with steaming broth, fresh bread, and a pot of healing salve. She set it down on the table, her movements quick and quiet, her eyes shining with an almost religious fervor. "We heard," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Garrick told us." The stag knelt. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. "They are afraid," she went on, her words tumbling out. "Maeve is in the council lodge with Kalen and the other elders. They are closeted. They are plotting. They will not let you win the next trial." "The silence," I said, the name of it, a cold weight in my stomach. Ilara's face went pale. "Yes, it is a trial of the mind. They will lock you in the Elder's Cave beneath the mountain. It is a place of absolute darkness and absolute quiet. No shifter has ever endured it for more than a day without going mad. The silence, it makes the wolf claw its way out. They say the whispers of the mountain drive you insane. You are to be left there for 3 days. 3 days in total darkness, buried alive. It was a torture designed to break the mind, to sever the connection between human and wolf. My victory in the hunt had been a victory of the wolf. This next trial was designed to destroy her. "There is more," Alara said, her voice dropping even lower. She leaned in close, her scent sharp with fear. I overheard one of Maeve's acolytes. She spoke of a special incense they planned to burn at the cave mouth. Not enough to be obvious, but enough to drift inside. It's called gray haze. It doesn't harm the body, but it amplifies fear. It turns shadows into monsters and silence into screams. They are not just testing you, Hyalus. They are ensuring your failure. The scent of betrayal once again. Deeper and more poisonous this time. They would not give me a fair fight. They would cheat. They would drive me mad and call it the will of the spirits. I looked at the young healer, at the fierce loyalty burning in her eyes. I had an ally. It was more than I'd had yesterday. "Thank you, Ilara," I said, my voice steady. Tell me everything you know about this gray haze, and tell me, is there an antidote? Alara's eyes widened. A slow, dangerous smile touched her lips. There is no antidote, she whispered, but there is a counteragent, an herb. It is called heartwood. It does not block the fear. It focuses it. It makes you face it. It will be the most terrifying experience of your life. But if your will is strong enough, you can master the visions instead of being consumed by them. I looked into the fire, at the dancing flames. I had faced Kaylin's strength. Now I would have to face the deepest, darkest corners of my own mind. Get me the heartwood, I said. The elders want to give me nightmares. Let's not disappoint them. The first rays of dawn painted the eastern sky in hues of rose and pale gold, but the light felt distant, a promise that belonged to another world. Here on the sacred ground before the great pyre, now a circle of cold gray ash, a different kind of dawn was breaking. My pack stood before me, their faces a mixture of awe, relief, and a deep, soul-shaking fear. They were not looking at Jorvin's widow. They were looking at their alpha. The heartstone, cool and impossibly heavy, pulsed with a soft, internal light against the palm of my hand. The weight of it was the weight of 1,000 generations, the burden of 1,000 lives. When Kaylin had fallen, the stone's angry red glare had softened, returning to its milky, opalescent calm. The rite was over, the choice was made. I looked at Kaylin. He was on his knees in the ash, his head bowed, his great shoulders slumped in a posture of utter defeat. I never thought I would see him adopt. He was not looking at me. He was staring at his hands, as if seeing them for the first time. The man who had lived his entire life defined by ambition, by strength, by the certainty of his destiny, was now adrift in a sea of his own making. He was broken. Elder Maeve stood frozen a few feet away, her face a mask of horrified disbelief. The venomous certainty that had animated her for so long had been scoured away, leaving behind the frail, terrified shell of an old woman who had just watched her entire worldview burn to the ground. She had gambled everything on tradition, and tradition had betrayed her. I took a breath, the crisp morning air a balm on my raw throat. My voice, when I spoke, did not need to be loud. It carried across the silence, imbued with the power of the heartstone, the authority of the alpha. The rite of blood and bone is complete, I declared. The words were a formality, a closing of a brutal chapter. The spirits have rendered their judgment. The pack has its leader. A murmur went through the crowd, a rustle of relief and allegiance. Garrick, his weathered face grim but proud, took a step forward, and then, in a movement that was both ancient and new, he dropped to one knee. "Alpha!" he growled, his voice thick with emotion. One by one, then in a great wave, the rest of the pack followed. Warriors, healers, tenders, even the pups who had crept out to watch. They knelt in the cold ash of their former alpha's pyre, bowing their heads, not to a bloodline, but to a spirit. Ilara knelt among them, her face streaked with tears, but her eyes were shining with a triumphant light that mirrored the fire in my own soul. My gaze swept over them, my family, my pack. My heart ached with the weight of my love for them, the crushing responsibility I now held. I had fought for a title, but I had won a future, their future. Only two remained standing, Maeve and Kaylin. I walked toward them, the heartstone a cool weight in my hand. I stopped before Maeve first. Her eyes, sunken in their wrinkled sockets, were filled with a hateful terror. She expected retribution, banishment, death. "You tried to poison me," I said, my voice quiet, for her ears alone. "You desecrated the rites. You let your fear of change nearly tear this pack apart. By the old laws, your life is forfeit." A tremor ran through her frail body. She squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the blow. "But the old laws are what led us here," I continued, my voice softening slightly. "They are a guide, not a cage. I am not the alpha you wanted, Maeve, but I am the alpha this pack needs. You will not be an elder any longer. You will step down from the council. You will spend your remaining days in the healer's den, and you will use your knowledge of the old ways to teach, not to command. You will serve the pack you sought to control. That is my judgment." Her eyes snapped open, wide with disbelief. It was a fate worse than death for a woman like her. To be stripped of her power, to be rendered irrelevant. She opened her mouth to speak, to protest, but one look at my face, at the unyielding fire in my eyes, and the words died on her lips. She gave a single jerking nod and stumbled away, a ghost already fading from the world of power. Then I faced Kalen. He did not look up. The scent of his shame was a bitter pall in the air. "You drove me to this," he whispered to the ground. "I was the rightful heir. The bloodline was clear." "The bloodline was a convenience," I said, my voice firm, but not without a sliver of understanding. He was a wolf forged by the expectations of others, trapped in a destiny he never questioned. "You sought power, Kalen, but you never sought to understand the heart of what you wished to lead. You saw the pack as a weapon. I see it as a family." He finally lifted his head. The raw agony in his eyes was startling. He was not just a defeated rival. He was a man whose entire identity had been shattered. The vision in the Heartstone had shown him not just my pain, but his own future. A lonely throne, a pack ruled by fear, a legacy of blood and shadow. He had seen the truth of his own heart, and it had broken him. "What will you do with me?" he asked, his voice rough. "Will you banish me? Kill me as I would have killed you?" I looked at his strong hands, the hands of a warrior. I looked at the strength in his broad shoulders. He was a hammer, yes, but even a hammer can be used to build rather than just destroy. To banish him would be to create a powerful, bitter enemy. To kill him would be to embrace the very tyranny I had fought against. "No," I said. I held out my hand, not in forgiveness, not yet, but in offering. "You are the strongest warrior we have. Your blood is Kael'thor blood. Your loyalty, when given, is absolute. I will not have you as my enemy, and you cannot be my rival." He stared at my outstretched hand as if it were a serpent. "I am the Alpha," I said, my voice ringing with unshakable authority. "The heart and head of this pack. But every Alpha needs a strong right hand, a protector, a warlord to stand at their side and face our enemies. I offer you the position of my beta, Kalen. Serve the pack, serve me. Find your redemption not in power, but in service. This is your choice. Kneel and accept your place, or walk away from this pack forever." The pack held its collective breath. The silence was absolute. Kalen stared at my hand, and a war raged in his eyes, the battle between his pride and his soul. He looked at me, truly looked at me, and for the first time, he saw not the woman who had taken his throne, but the Alpha who had earned it. Slowly, his shoulders, which had been slumped in defeat, began to straighten. The brokenness in his eyes was replaced by a flicker of a new, unfamiliar light. Purpose. With a deep, shuddering breath that sounded like a sob, he reached out and took my hand. His grip was firm, his calloused palm rough against mine. And then he lowered his head and knelt before me, a true vow of fealty. "Alpha," he said, and the word was not a curse, but a promise. A new sun was rising. I looked out at my pack, at my new beta kneeling before me, and I felt the last ghost of Jorvin's presence settle around me like a warm cloak. His legacy was not ashen memory. It was here, in the pack he had loved, in the mate he had believed in. I was Hylas Dravene. I was the Alpha who had risen from the ashes, and our story was just beginning.